Have you ever had a dream so big it felt like it could change the world? Well, today we're diving into the incredible story of a young man named Joseph, whose dreams didn't just change his life, they changed the course of history. This is a tale of betrayal, resilience, and unbelievable twists of fate, stretching from a dusty pit to the golden throne of Egypt. It all begins with a family, a large one. Joseph was one of 12 brothers, but he was his father Jacob's favorite. To show his affection, Jacob gave Joseph a stunning multicolored coat. This beautiful gift, however, became a symbol of jealousy for his older brothers. Their envy grew even stronger because of Joseph's dreams. He wasn't shy about sharing them, either. In one dream, his brother's sheaves of wheat bowed down to his. In another, the sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed to him. To his brothers, this was the ultimate display of arrogance. They saw it as a prediction that they would one day be subservient to their younger sibling, and they couldn't stand it. One day, Jacob sent 17-year-old Joseph to check on his brothers, who were tending the flocks far from home. When they saw him approaching in the distance, their simmering resentment boiled over. "Here comes the dreamer," they sneered. Their initial plan was horrifying: to kill him and throw him into a pit. But Reuben, the eldest, convinced them to spare his life, suggesting they just leave him in an empty cistern. His secret plan was to come back later and rescue him. So they stripped Joseph of his precious coat, threw him into the pit, and sat down to eat, indifferent to his cries for help. Just then, a caravan of Ishmaelite traders heading to Egypt appeared. It was another brother, Judah, who came up with a new idea. Why let him die for no reason? Why not sell him and make a profit? And so, for 20 pieces of silver, Joseph was sold into slavery. To cover their tracks, the brothers dipped his colorful coat in goat's blood and presented it to their father Jacob. Heartbroken and deceived, Jacob believed his favorite son had been devoured by a wild animal. He mourned for Joseph for years, refusing to be comforted. Meanwhile, Joseph was taken to Egypt, a foreign land with foreign gods and a foreign language. He was sold again, this time to Potiphar, the captain of Pharaoh's guard. But here's where Joseph's story starts to defy expectations. Despite his circumstances, he didn't despair. He worked diligently and honestly, and God was with him. Potiphar saw that everything Joseph touched prospered. Soon, he put Joseph in charge of his entire household. Everything was under Joseph's command. Potiphar didn't have to worry about a thing. Joseph was not only capable but also handsome, and he caught the eye of Potiphar's wife. Day after day, she tried to seduce him, but Joseph refused. He told her, "My master has entrusted me with everything in his house. How could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" His integrity was unshakable. But one day, she grabbed him by his cloak, insisting he lie with her. Joseph fled, leaving his cloak in her hand. Humiliated and furious, she flipped the story. She accused Joseph of trying to assault her, using his cloak as false evidence. When Potiphar came home, he was enraged. Without a fair trial, Joseph was thrown into the royal prison, from the head of a household to the darkness of a dungeon. It seemed like Joseph had hit rock bottom again. But even in prison, his character shone through. He remained faithful and hardworking. The chief jailer soon noticed Joseph's capabilities, just as Potiphar had. Before long, Joseph was put in charge of all the other prisoners. He was a prisoner himself, yet he was running the prison. 2 years passed. In that time, 2 of Pharaoh's officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, were thrown into the same prison. One morning, Joseph found them looking dejected. They had both had strange dreams the night before and had no one to interpret them. Joseph, ever faithful, told them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." The cupbearer went first. He dreamt of a vine with 3 branches that budded, blossomed, and produced ripe grapes. He squeezed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup and gave it to him. Joseph's interpretation was a message of hope. "In 3 days, Pharaoh will restore you to your position." Joseph then made a simple request. "When you are free, please remember me and mention me to Pharaoh, so I can get out of this place." Then the baker shared his dream. He had 3 baskets of bread on his head, and birds were eating from the top basket. Joseph's interpretation for him was grim. "In 3 days, Pharaoh will hang you, and the birds will eat your flesh." Everything happened exactly as Joseph had predicted. 3 days later, on Pharaoh's birthday, the chief cupbearer was restored to his post, and the chief baker was executed. But in his joy and relief, the cupbearer forgot all about Joseph. He left him to languish in prison, his promise forgotten. 2 more long years went by. Joseph was now 30 years old, having spent 13 years as a slave and a prisoner in Egypt. Then, one night, Pharaoh himself had 2 deeply disturbing dreams. In the first, 7 fat, healthy cows came out of the Nile River, followed by 7 ugly, gaunt cows that devoured the healthy ones. In the second dream, 7 full, healthy heads of grain were swallowed up by 7 thin, scorched heads of grain. Pharaoh woke up troubled. He summoned all the magicians and wise men of Egypt, but no one could interpret the dreams. It was at this moment that the chief cupbearer's memory was jogged. He suddenly remembered Joseph. He told Pharaoh about the young Hebrew man in prison who had accurately interpreted his dream, and the baker, Estering 2 years earlier. Desperate for answers, Pharaoh immediately sent for Joseph. Joseph was quickly brought out of the dungeon, cleaned up, and presented before the most powerful man in the world. Pharaoh told him, "I have heard that you can interpret dreams." Joseph's reply was humble and full of faith. "I cannot do it, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires." After hearing the dreams, Joseph explained their meaning. The 2 dreams were one message from God. The 7 healthy cows and 7 healthy heads of grain represented 7 years of great abundance that were coming to Egypt. The 7 gaunt cows and 7 thin heads of grain represented 7 years of devastating famine that would follow. The famine would be so severe that the years of plenty would be completely forgotten. Joseph then offered a brilliant strategic plan. He advised Pharaoh to appoint a wise and discerning man to oversee the land to collect 1/5 of the harvest during the 7 years of plenty, and to store it in cities as a reserve for the 7 years of famine. Pharaoh and his officials were astounded by the clarity of the interpretation and the wisdom of the plan. Pharaoh looked at Joseph and said to his court, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" Turning to Joseph, he declared, "Since God has made all this known to you, there's no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." In an instant, Joseph's life was transformed. Pharaoh gave him his signet ring, dressed him in fine linen robes, and put a gold chain around his neck. He gave him a new Egyptian name, Zaphenath-Paneah, and a wife, Asenath. Joseph, the forgotten prisoner, was now the second most powerful man in Egypt, the prime minister. For the next 7 years, Joseph traveled throughout Egypt, overseeing the collection and storage of immense quantities of grain. The abundance was just as he had predicted, so vast they couldn't even measure it all. During this time, Joseph and his wife had 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Then, the 7 years of plenty ended, and the 7 years of famine began. The famine was severe, not just in Egypt, but across the entire world. When the Egyptian people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he directed them to Joseph. Joseph opened the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians. News of Egypt's reserves spread, and people from all surrounding lands came to buy food from Joseph. The famine also gripped the land of Canaan, where Jacob and his family lived. Hearing there was grain in Egypt, Jacob sent 10 of his sons to buy some. He kept his youngest son, Benjamin, at home, fearing he might lose him just as he had lost Joseph. When the 10 brothers arrived in Egypt, they were brought before the powerful governor to request grain. They bowed down before him, their faces to the ground. They had no idea they were bowing to the very brother they had sold into slavery 2 decades earlier. But Joseph recognized them immediately. His childhood dream was coming true right before his eyes. Instead of revealing himself, Joseph decided to test them. He spoke harshly, accusing them of being spies. They frantically denied it, explaining they were 12 brothers from Canaan, one was no more, and the youngest was at home with their father. Seizing the opportunity, Joseph demanded they prove their story by bringing their youngest brother, Benjamin, to him. He kept one brother, Simeon, as a hostage and sent the others home with grain. When they returned to Jacob and told him what had happened, he was devastated. "You have deprived me of my children," he cried. "Joseph is no more, Simeon is no more, and now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me." He refused to let Benjamin go. But the famine worsened and their grain ran out. Judah, who had originally suggested selling Joseph, stepped forward. He pledged his own life for Benjamin's safety, promising to bear the blame forever if he failed to bring him back. Reluctantly, Jacob agreed, sending them off with gifts and double the silver. When the brothers returned to Egypt with Benjamin, Joseph was overcome with emotion upon seeing his full brother. He hosted a feast for them, seating them in order of their birth, which amazed them. He gave Benjamin 5 times the portion of food as the others, but Joseph had one final test. As they were leaving, he had his personal silver cup hidden in Benjamin's sack of grain. Shortly after they departed, he sent his steward after them to catch the thief. The cup was found in Benjamin's sack, and the brothers were dragged back to Joseph's palace, terrified. Judah made a passionate plea. He explained that their father, Jacob, would die of grief if Benjamin did not return. He offered himself as a slave in Benjamin's place. Seeing this, seeing that his brothers had truly changed, that they were now willing to sacrifice themselves for their youngest brother and their father, Joseph could no longer control his emotions. He ordered everyone else out of the room. And then, weeping loudly, he finally revealed himself. "I am Joseph," he cried out. "Is my father still alive?" His brothers were speechless, frozen in shock and fear. But Joseph reassured them. "Do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here," he said, "because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you." He explained how his journey, through all its pain, was part of a divine plan to preserve their family. He urged them to hurry back to Canaan and bring their father and all their families to live in Egypt, in the fertile land of Goshen, where he could provide for them. The reunion was emotional and profound, filled with tears and forgiveness. Pharaoh, delighted by the news, provided wagons and provisions for the journey. When the brothers returned and told Jacob that Joseph was alive and was the ruler of all Egypt, the old man's heart nearly stopped. But when he saw the wagons Pharaoh had sent, his spirit revived. "I have been told that my son Joseph is still alive," he said. "I will go and see him before I die." And so Jacob and his entire household, 70 people in all, journeyed to Egypt. The reunion between the long-lost son and the grieving father was one of the most moving moments in history. They settled in Goshen, and Joseph cared for his family throughout the rest of the famine. Joseph's story is a powerful testament to the idea that even in our darkest moments, there can be a greater purpose at play. It's a story about forgiveness, the transformation of character, and the incredible way that a life of integrity and faith can turn a pit of despair into a palace of purpose. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible stories from history. We'll see you in the next one.